The Great Crusade, humanity's greatest campaign of conquest, to bring thousands of human worlds lost in the darkness of the galaxy back under the wings of the Imperium. And at the head of this vast movement stood one name, Horus Lupercal, the Emperor's most beloved son, Primarch of the Luna Wolves Legion, and War Master of all the Emperor's armies. This is the story of his rise, his fall, and of the day the galaxy began to burn. The 63rd Expedition Fleet had arrived at a new system, led by Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, and what they found was astonishing. The ruler of this 9-planet system was an old man who had declared himself the Emperor of mankind. After thousands of years of isolation, he genuinely believed he was the true master of the galaxy. Horus despised bloodshed. Diplomacy stood above all else for him. He sent Captain Hastur Sejanus of the 4th Company as his envoy. Sejanus was not merely a warrior equal to Abaddon. He was also an unparalleled diplomat, beloved by all, respected by all. The false emperor had him slaughtered in his palace. Through his elite guards, the Invisibles, the 63rd Expedition Fleet was plunged into grief. Sejanus was one of Horus's most beloved sons. Even so, Horus gave diplomacy one more chance. He sent his equerry, Malakhurst, renowned for his cunning despite his disability. Malakhurst's ship was struck by the planet's defenses. It fell from the sky, wreathed in flames. The accident would horrifically deform Malakhurst's body and earn him the name the Twisted. Diplomacy was dead. Now only war would speak. Horus ordered the spear-tip assault to strike directly at the enemy's throat. Abaddon, Torgadon, Little Horus Aximand, and Captain Garviel Loken of the 10th Company. Drop pods and stormbirds rained down upon the false emperor's high city. They struck at the base of the palace in the shadow of the Mechanicum's massive titans. In their bone-white armor, an unstoppable force. But inside the palace, a great danger waited. The Invisibles. Completely invisible when still. Elite warriors who appeared only as ripples in the air when they moved. They dealt the Luna Wolves devastating casualties with their massive energy weapons. Loken's closest friend, Sergeant Nero Vippus, lost his right hand in the ambush. Loken pushed his visor's contrast to maximum. He learned to see them through the distortions in the air and made them bleed with his chainsword. Loken fought his way to the summit of the false emperor's massive tower. The tower was so high it rose above the clouds. At that moment, the Catulan Reavers reached the tower on jump packs. They shot the old man. But the old man was only a decoy. The true emperor sat invisibly upon the throne. A massive psychic shockwave struck the room. The Catulan warriors were hurled through the windows into the void. Loken drove his sword into the stone floor and barely held on. And then a blinding green light of teleportation blazed. A god descended, armor of gold and light, a white cloak cascading from his shoulders. The great eye symbol upon his chest, War Master Horus. He fired a single shot from his storm bolter. It shattered the invisible tyrant upon the throne. The psychic storm died instantly. As Loken hung from the edge of the abyss, Horus's powerful hand seized him and pulled him up. The false emperor was dead. When the conquest was complete, something new began. The remembrancers. Millions of civilians, poets, painters, sculptors, documentarians. The emperor wanted his armies not only to destroy, but to build and be remembered by history. Among them were the poet Ignace Carcassi, the imagist Euphrates Keeler, and the documentarian Mercedes Olaton. The arrival of these civilian intellectuals created unease among the Astartes, who had known nothing but war for thousands of years. But the true danger lay not on the battlefield, it lay in ideas. Meanwhile, Loken was engaged in deep discussions with Kirill Sinderman, the fleet's chief iterator. The iterators were tasked with teaching the imperial truth to those left behind after conquest. Purged of religion, purged of superstition, pure science. Sinderman told Loken this. The Astartes are nothing but weapons, but even weapons must understand why they are fired. This philosophical hunger set Loken apart from other space marines. And then an offer came to Loken. The Mournival, the Luna Wolves' most prestigious advisory council, the conscience and voice of the War Master, composed of 4 captains. Abaddon represented fury. Torgadon represented joy and humor. Little Horus Aximenand represented reason and strategy. The missing final piece was given to Loken. Logic, wisdom, and conscience. Midnight, a ruined water garden, dim lanterns, a black reflecting pool. They waded into the water. Abaddon, Torgadon, and Aximenand swore their oaths to Loken, representing the cycles of the moon. A bond of brotherhood that nothing but death could break. Loken had joined the Mournival. The new moon symbol was etched upon his helm. He was now one of Horus's closest advisors. In the storms to come, he would have to be the voice of reason. Then came the whisperheads. Rebels continued to resist in the snow-covered mountains. As the storm birds descended onto the snowy peaks, a crackling, whispering, revolting voice began bleeding through every vox channel in the fleet. Samus, that is the only name you will hear. Samus, that means the end and death. Samus is here. Loken believed this was merely a psychological tactic. Space Marines did not know fear. The 10th Company shattered the rebels' cave fortress in 68 minutes. The rebels were slaughtered. The mountains were cleared. But the true tragedy came after the battle was over. One of Loken's most senior sergeants, Xavier Jubal, was missing. Loken found him standing alone in a deep cave, trembling, claiming the water running down the walls was whispering the name Samus. Then it happened. Jubal raised his bolter and opened fire on his own brothers. Sergeant Udon and the soldiers beside him fell. A space marine attacking his own kind was an unthinkable taboo. Loken drew his sword. He fought his former brother to the death, blade against blade, fist against fist. In the end, Loken was forced to kill him with his sword. But it was not over. When Cinderman and Keeler descended into the cave, Jubal's corpse began to move. Grotesque, bloated. It expanded into a swollen mass of flesh, burst through the Astartes' armor from within. Needle-like teeth, massive diseased limbs. A demon. Samus is here. It tore apart 2 remembrancers in seconds. Loken and Vipus fired hundreds of rounds. They barely stopped the creature. Loken's mind was shattered. Cinderman tried to rationalize what had happened as an alien virus. But Loken knew. This was a demon. Horus told him the truth. A parallel anarchic dimension known as the Warp. The locals had used it to possess Jubal's weakened mind. Horus ordered the secret kept. But for Euphrates Keeler, this rational explanation meant nothing. The demonic horror she had witnessed had shaken her to her foundations. And she found salvation not in science, but in faith. She began reading the Lectitio Divinitatis, a forbidden manuscript that rejected the imperial truth. If such evil existed in the universe, the only power capable of stopping it had to be a god. And that god could be none other than the Emperor of mankind. Then came the world called Murder. A distress call from Captain Ketis Frome of the Blood Angels' 141st Expedition Fleet. The only part of the message that could be deciphered was blood-chilling. This world is murder. Horus immediately changed course, but another fleet had arrived there before them, the Emperor's children. Their commander, Lord Commander Eidolon, was an arrogant leader consumed by glory. Without waiting for Horus, he landed 1/3 of his army on this catastrophic world. The landing became a complete disaster. The planet was utterly lethal. Toxic atmosphere, constant lightning storms. And there they met the megarachnids. 3 meters tall, a perfect fusion of metal and organic tissue. 4 legs, arms like blades, fast as the wind, and deadly. Captain Saul Tarvitz and the arrogant swordsman Lucius were trying to keep their men alive. Lucius took a perverse pleasure in the deadly speed of the combat. He snatched up a severed silver limb from one of the creatures and cut his enemies down with it alongside his own blade. To Lucius, this was merely a test of skill. Deep in the forest, they encountered a horrifying sight. Massive, calcified white trees. Hanging from their spike-like branches were the shattered corpses of lost blood angels. Tarvitz defied Eidolon's direct order. He gathered every bomb his men carried and blew the grotesque trees apart. He avenged his fallen brothers, and the destruction of the trees broke the atmospheric storm. The sky cleared. The Luna wolves in orbit located Tarvitz and the survivors. Captain Tarek Torgadden's spear-tip team dropped directly into the heart of the battle. "Looper cow!" The white-armored giants pulled Tarvitz back from the edge of death. When Torgadden confronted Eidolon afterward, Eidolon expected him to bow. Torgadon drove a fist into his chest. I am the chosen weapon of the War Master. I will never show respect to a wretch like you who sends his men to their deaths for glory. Then Sanguinius himself arrived with his own fleet, the Angel, Primarch of the Blood Angels. Horus and Sanguinius descended to the surface of murder together. Two demigod Primarchs fighting shoulder to shoulder. 6 months of endless, grinding war of extermination. And then other ships appeared in the sky. Massive, silver-white, spear-shaped. Not enemies. The Interrex, a highly advanced star empire composed entirely of humans. They communicated through envoys who played singing instruments and learned. The world of murder was actually a prison world built to contain the megarachnids. Those signals had not been a call for help. They were a warning. Stay away. This place is dangerous. The Interrex had separated from old Terra thousands of years ago, incredibly advanced in science, art, and culture. Not a warrior empire, an enlightened and peaceful society. They had even made peace with an alien race called the Kinnebrak and integrated them into their society rather than destroying them. Horus wanted to bring the Interrex peacefully into the Imperium. When Abaddon suggested destroying them for consorting with Xenos, Horus refused. Tolerance is not weakness. We must learn. He descended to the breathtaking Interrex capital, Zenobia Principis. During a night when the negotiations had stalled, Interrex commander Mithras Taul spoke plainly. We have observed you. Massive soldiers who worship war. Your leader's title is War Master. This militaristic manner of yours reeks of chaos. We feared that chaos had seized Terra, and that you were its bloodthirsty emissaries. Loken objected. Tull believed in his innocence. A complete diplomatic success was within reach. Then screams erupted. The Hall of Devices was in flames. The Kinnebrak guardian Asherot had been murdered, and a legendary cursed blade called the Anatheme had been stolen. A weapon that analyzed its target's biology and produced a tailored venom to kill them. The Interrex army attacked. Horus ordered his men to defend only at first. As his bodyguards fell one by one, he was forced to draw his sword. Lupercal! The War Master and Loken fought back to back, cutting their way out of the burning city. A catastrophic war had begun with the peaceful Interrex civilization. A war that could have saved billions of lives. Horus barely escaped to the ships. He was consumed by shame and grief. And in the wake of all this tragedy, he accepted something the Emperor had offered him at Ulanor. His legion's name would no longer be the Luna Wolves. They would be the Sons of Horus. All their armor was repainted in the pale green of the sea. The burning eye of Horus was placed upon their pauldrons. The War Master's power was consolidated. But within him, a deep isolation had begun to take hold. During all of this, Loken discovered the existence of secret warrior lodges, commanders who set aside their ranks, meeting secretly with their medallions. It seemed sincere at first, but it left an unease gnawing at him. A group grown too accustomed to keeping secrets could one day conceal far darker ones. He was right. The true architect of all this catastrophe was not Horus's warriors. It was Erebus, first chaplain of the Word-Bearers Legion, present in the fleet as a guest, appearing wise and obedient on the surface. In the darkest compartment of the vengeful spirit, amid rats and mold in the light of a single candle, Erebus stared at the stolen anathemae and smiled. The plan that would change the fate of the universe was running like clockwork. Erebus approached Horus. He requested that the fleet be diverted to the Davin system to suppress a small rebellion. And the fleet drifted step by step into the darkness. The weight of the War Master title was crushing Horus from within. The Emperor had returned to Terra for his secret project, leaving the entire galaxy's conquest on Horus's shoulders. He was no longer just a warrior. He was an administrator, listening to the complaints of politicians, meeting the demands of tax collectors. For a demigod born to fight, this was a cage. Slowly, quietly, the darkness inside him grew. Davin's moon, a world of decay and death. Not a world where life flourished, but where it rotted. As the storm birds swept through the atmosphere, the Space Marines stepped onto the surface. And what met them was not an honorable enemy. It was a catastrophe. Dense yellowish fog covered everything. The mud clung to their boots like it wanted to swallow them. The air smelled of dead flesh and rotting vegetation. And from beneath the water, horrifying things began to rise. These were not Yugen-Temba's soldiers. These were the corpses of soldiers long since dead, flesh falling from their bones, yet walking, eyes burning with a green flame, and from their mouths a constant whisper. Samus is here. Nurgle's corrupting grace had claimed this world. Horus marched at the head of his army, like an unstoppable god. At the heart of this decay, driven deep into the swamp's core, lay a massive wreck. Yugen-Temba's flagship, the glory of Terra. Its hull covered in rust and diseased vines. Horus left Loken and Torgadon outside as a rear guard and entered the dark, foul-smelling passages of the ship alone. Inside that massive ruin, his old friend was waiting, the one who would change the fate of the universe. The bridge of the glory of Terra had transformed from a proud command center into a slaughterhouse. Dead soldiers hung from the ceiling, cables and flesh intertwined. And in the middle of those ruins, Yugen-Temba stood. But this was not Temba. The man's body had swollen grotesquely, his skin bursting with disease. A monster oozing pus from his eyes. Nurgle had claimed him. Horus felt deep fury and grief seeing his old friend like this. Temba, half-conscious, called out to him. "We don't have to be enemies," he gurgled. He whispered that the power of the warp was far more real than the Emperor's lies. Horus refused. The imperial truth could not permit such heresy. The battle began. Horus attacked with his immense size and speed. Despite Temba's sluggishness, the weapon in his hand possessed incredible lethality. A strange blade that looked as if carved from gray stone, yet gleamed like diamond. This was not an ordinary weapon. This was the anatheme, stolen from the Interrex, a Kinnebrak blade that produced a venom specifically tailored to kill its target. Horus cut through Temba again and again, dealt heavy wounds. But Temba's body felt no pain. With one wild swing, the anatheme tore through the air. It pierced Horus's pauldron and buried itself in the Primarch's flesh. Horus was immune to all disease and all poison through his extraordinary genetics. But the anatheme was not merely a venom. It was an intelligent weapon designed specifically to kill Horus. Horus roared in agony. He swept his blade and severed Temba's arm, then struck him through the heart. In the moment of death, Temba broke free from the demon's grip for just a few seconds. The real Temba, an old friend. He looked at Horus with aged eyes. "Forgive me, brother," he whispered. I didn't know the universe was this dark." And he died. When Loken, Abaddon, and Aximand reached the bridge, they froze at the sight before them. The greatest commander of humanity, the Emperor's most perfect son, lay on the ground in a pool of blood. Horus had fallen. Abaddon was sobbing, unable to accept that a demigod lay on his deathbed. Time was running out. The poison coursing through the War Master's veins was about to stop the heart of the Imperium. When the vengeful spirit brought Horus back, panic and despair aboard the ship were indescribable. Chief Apothecary Vadden used every scientific resource at his disposal to keep Horus alive. But the venom was defeating even the Primarch's superhuman biology. Science and reason were helpless. The imperial truth could not save Horus. And in that moment of desperation, a calm and reassuring voice rose from the shadows. Erebus. Erebus gathered the warrior lodge together, a secret structure where ranks were set aside, where brotherhood stood above all else. But Erebus had used this lodge as a stepping stone for his dark plan. He whispered to the desperate Mournival members Abaddon and Aximand. Where science ended, an ancient solution existed. The mystic healers of the Serpent Lodge, at a temple called Delphos. They could heal the War Master through rituals and sorcery. Garviel Loken and Tarek Torgadden violently opposed this idea. Turning to sorcery and superstition was a betrayal of the very foundation of the Imperium. Loken sensed something dark within all of this. But for Abaddon and Aximand, Horus's life mattered more than the Emperor's rules. "He is our father," roared Abaddon. The two sides confronted each other at the doors of the Delphos temple. The Mournival, That invincible brotherhood of four had come to the point of drawing swords against each other. Abaddon and Aximand delivered Horus's dying body to the temple's mysterious priests. When those massive bronze and stone doors slammed shut with a great boom, Loken collapsed to his knees outside, helpless. Behind those doors, there were no healers waiting to cure the War Master. What awaited him was a ritual that would shatter his soul forever. When Horus opened his eyes, he was not in the temple on Davin. He found himself in a paradise of lush green meadows and high mountains. No wounds, no pain. And right before him stood his old, dearly beloved friend, Hastur Sejanus. Horus embraced him with joy. But this Sejanus was a puppet created by Chaos to manipulate Horus. Sejanus began nurturing all those seeds of distrust in Horus's mind. He said the Emperor was using them as mere tools, that when his work was done, he would discard the Space Marines and declare himself a god. The warp bent time and space. Sejanus took Horus to the future of Terra. What Horus saw horrified him. In massive golden temples, fanatical crowds worshipped the Emperor as a god. Among the statues stood Leman Russ, Rogel Dorn, Sanguinius. But Horus was nowhere. The War Master, the man who had conquered the entire universe in blood, had been erased from history. His father had forgotten him. As fury filled Horus's soul, the fabric of the warp tore open. A massive wolf appeared, then suddenly transformed. Magnus the Red. Magnus had projected himself astrally from his distant world of Prospero and entered Horus's mind to warn him. "Don't believe it, Horus," he cried. "What you're seeing is only the lies of Chaos. That is not Sejanus." When Magnus tore apart the illusion with his sorcery, underneath was the face of Word-Bearer's chaplain Erebus. But Erebus did not step back. "I only showed you what will truly happen in the future," he said calmly. "The Emperor will sell us all for his own godhood. But the true gods of the warp only want to exist. Give them the galaxy, and they will make you the new and only true master of mankind." Two voices, two brothers, one whispering loyalty, the other whispering power. Horus looked at Magnus, then at Erebus. The feeling of betrayal had poisoned his great heart. The tax collectors, the bureaucrats who wouldn't listen, the father who had left him alone. Horus had accepted the idea that the Emperor would use him like an object and then discard him. "Enough!" roared the War Master. "I have made my decision." Horus stepped into the darkness, and that step became the death warrant of tens of billions. When the doors of the Delphos temple opened 9 days later, the War Master stepped outside, his armor gleaming, his eyes confident as before. Loken, Torgadon, and all the Space Marines cried out joyfully. "Lupercal!" Their father, their leader, had returned. But Horus was not the same Horus. He was no longer merely the commander of the Luna Wolves. He was the chosen of chaos. Shortly after his return, the 63rd Expedition Fleet encountered the Oretian technocracy, an advanced human civilization. Normally, Horus would have chosen diplomacy, but this time, without reason or warning, he ordered a massacre. Their ambassadors were struck down, their warriors annihilated. Loken and Torgadon stood in horror at this meaningless savagery. The same days brought supernatural events converging. Remembrancer Ignace Carcassi, who had begun writing about the Imperium's corruption, was silenced in his cell, brutally. Euphrates Keeler, deep within the ship, faced a demon emerging from the warp, and survived. Sheltering in the Emperor's protective divine light, she was now a saint, and the greatest betrayal. The cursed blade Anatheme that had wounded Horus was in Vadon's possession. Then Fabius of the Emperor's Children Legion forcibly took it from him. When Vadon asked who gave the order, the answer was blood-chilling. The order had come from War Master Horus himself. The truth finally emerged into daylight. The rebellion on Davin, the glory of Terra, the stolen Anatheme. None of it had been coincidence. All of it had been the flawlessly executed plan of a single person. First, Chaplain Erebus. Erebus had poisoned Temba. Erebus had stolen the blade. Erebus had built the warrior lodge. And Erebus had delivered Horus into the arms of the warp. Worse still, Horus now knew the truth, and he fully embraced it. In the dark command chamber of the flagship, Horus gathered his most loyal commanders around him. Abaddon, Aximand, Erebus. Horus turned to them and spoke the words that would split the history of the universe in two. I will unseat the Emperor from the throne on Terra, and I will become the master of mankind. Brother will fight brother. Blood will flow. I will set the galaxy ablaze, and from its ashes, a new Imperium will be born. There was no turning back. The arrow had left the bow. The Horus Heresy had begun. But words were not enough. Declarations were not enough. For his rebellion to succeed, Horus needed to cleanse his own armies first. He needed to erase those who would remain loyal to the Emperor. And he found the perfect trap. Istvan III. The planetary governor of Istvan III, Vardis Prawl, had turned his back on the imperial truth. He had submitted to the mystical power of a local sorcerer cult called the War Singers, and raised the flag of rebellion. Horus gathered 4 legions to crush this rebellion. The Sons of Horus, the Death Guard, the World Eaters, and the Emperor's Children. 4 full Astartes legions, far more than enough to crush a single city. But Horus's mind held a different target entirely. not the rebels of Istvan, his own armies. The warrior lodges and Erebus had already split the legions in two, those who would follow Horus's dark vision and those who would remain loyal to the Emperor. Before his rebellion, Horus needed to eliminate the friction within his army. And so the diabolical spear-tip plan was set in motion. Horus carefully selected the honorable, loyal warriors from each legion, warriors who were not members of the lodge. Captain Garviel Loken, Tarek Torgadon, Saul Tarvitz, Erlin, and thousands of other loyal soldiers. All of them were loaded into drop pods with the lie that the honor of taking Coral City was being granted to them, and they were sent down to the surface of Istvan III to die. These honorable warriors descended from the sky like angels wreathed in flames, plunged into bloody close combat with the war singers and rebels. While above them, in orbit, their brothers were preparing to press the cold keys of betrayal. Those fighting below did so with honor. Those above were ready to commit the unthinkable. The battle on the surface raged in all its horror, but aboard the Andronius, in orbit, Captain Saul Tarvitz of the Emperor's Children felt something was wrong. He had been scheduled to go down to the surface as well, but he had given his place to another brother out of an old debt of honor and had remained on the ship. When Tarvitz descended to the ship's massive weapons decks, he encountered a blood-chilling truth. The guns were ready to fire, and what the Mechanicum priests had loaded into those massive guns was no ordinary ammunition. These were the most terrible, most forbidden weapons in the galaxy. Virus bombs. A virus bomb. A weapon that destroyed all organic life on the planet it struck. Plants, animals, humans. The life-eater virus, liquefying cells within seconds, turning an entire world into a soup of flesh. Tarvitz understood in that moment. The fleet above had not come to rescue or support the brothers fighting below. It had come to erase them, together with Istvan III. Hundreds of thousands of Space Marines were about to be executed by their own fathers. Without a moment's hesitation, Tarvitz stole a Thunderhawk gunship. His goal was to descend to the surface and warn his brothers. The ship's commander, Lord Commander Eidolon, sent hunter ships after him. As Tarvitz's ship took hits and was about to be destroyed, a hopeful voice crackled over the Vox. Death Guard Captain Nathaniel Garrow, commander of the Eisenstein, a blood brother of Tarvitz. Tarvitz cried out over the Vox, "We've been betrayed! The fleet is going to strike the planet and our brothers with virus bombs!" Garrow's mind reeled. Could a Primarch truly do such a thing? But he knew his brother Tarvitz. He never lied. Garrow did not hesitate. He fired his own guns at the hunter ships pursuing Tarvitz, bought him time to reach the surface, and set course for the warp with the Eisenstein, to bring news of the betrayal to Terra, to the Emperor. As Tarvitz fell toward the surface in flames, he looked up at the sky. The virus bombs had already been fired, gleaming like stars as they entered the atmosphere. Time was running out. The first bomb fell on Coral City, then the second, the 10th, the 100th. Tarvitz crash-landed his ship. He ran directly to World Eater's commander, Erlim. "Get to the shelters! Death is raining from the sky!" With the warnings of Tarvitz and Loken, some of the loyal soldiers began frantically running toward underground tombs beneath the palace. But not everyone was that fortunate. When the virus was released, Istvan III became hell. The moment the virus mixed with the air, it began tearing apart every living thing it reached. World Eaters, Death Guard, millions of civilians. Not even Astartes' armor provided complete protection. The virus seeped through the smallest scratch or ventilation gap, and even these genetically perfected warriors were liquefied within seconds. Soldiers collapsed to their knees, their rotting flesh flowing out of their armor. And from the mouths of proud space marines, a sound never heard before. Terrible, agonized screams. The screams of billions of civilians and thousands of betrayed warriors echoed across every corner of the planet. Within minutes, all biological life on Istvan III had melted, turned into a black, foul, gas-filled liquid. Aboard the vengeful Spirit, Horus watched this spectacle in cold blood. So that no witnesses would remain, he had the innocent civilians and artists aboard the ship slaughtered simultaneously. The poet Ignace Carcassi was killed, and below, as the massive flammable gas clouds spread through the atmosphere, Horus gave his final order: "Let the galaxy burn." A single laser beam fired from orbit ignited the gases covering the atmosphere. In 1 second, the entire planet, from surface to sky, surrendered to a massive scorching firestorm. Cities exploded. Oceans boiled. Flesh and bone turned to ash. Istvan III was now a graveyard. Horus leaned back, confident of his victory. But when the fires died down, from among the ruins covered in black ash, figures began to emerge, their armor scorched, their eyes burning with the fire of vengeance. Garviel Loken, Tarek Torgadon, and thousands of loyal warriors who had taken shelter thanks to Tarvitz's warning. Alive. Horus had believed he could wipe them out with a single keystroke. He was wrong. The Loyalists had not died. Seeing the survivors below, Horus's plan had been thrown off. The person who disrupted the plan was someone entirely unexpected. World Eater's Primarch, Angron. Angron was a conqueror, a butcher. He could not stomach his own sons surviving below and being cowardly bombed from orbit. Defying Horus's orders, he took thousands of traitor World Eaters, boarded drop pods, and descended directly into the ruins of Coral City. That moment was the moment the Horus Heresy truly began. Angron attacked directly, howling against his own sons, against the loyal World Eaters. Captain Erlin and his men were shaken when they saw who was coming at them. Their own father, their genetic ancestor, Angron. But this was a battlefield, and World Eaters never stepped back. "Death to those who bring us death!" cried Erlin, and he attacked his own Primarch directly. Angron tore them apart in seconds. Brother cut brother. Astartes' blood was spilled by Astartes' hands for the first time with such savagery. On the other side of the city, Garviel Loken and Terek Torgadon had gathered the surviving loyal sons of Horus around them. Loken felt the collapse of all that noble faith and loyalty within him. The one who had abandoned them to die was Horus, the one he had loved like a father. Loken and Torgadon joined forces with Saul Tarvitz and his emperor's children. They established a massive defensive line at Precentaur's palace. Their names no longer mattered. They were no longer the sons of Horus. They were the Luna Wolves, their old and honorable name. And so the cleansing operation planned to last hours turned into a bloody trench and rubble war lasting weeks, months. Tarvitz's military genius, Loken's unbreakable will, and the Loyalists' faith. If we are to die, we will take them with us to hell. They dealt heavy casualties to the traitors' armies. Titans bombarded the city. Rounds clashed in the air. But the Loyalists did not retreat a single step from the palace. Until betrayal came not from the skies, but from right beside them. The swordsman, Lucius, had been with Tarvitz from the beginning. He was a magnificent fighter, but his heart had rotted with arrogance and hunger for glory. Lucius could not accept dying under the command of a modest officer like Tarvitz. He wanted a legion where his talents could be showcased, where fame and glory could be won. The traitor Lord Commander Eidolon sighed. Through a secret Vox channel, Lucius reached Eidolon and made a horrifying offer. "Take me back into my legion. I'll give you Tarvitz and the palace's defensive lines." And so the Loyalists' impenetrable defense was broken from within by a brother's sword. Lucius killed his own comrades and opened the outer gates to the traitors. When Tarvitz saw this betrayal, his heart shattered. He dueled Lucius. Tarvitz, no matter how skilled, could not match the best swordsman in the galaxy. But he was not alone. Together with the Loyalists around him, they heavily wounded Lucius and forced him to flee. But the damage was done. The traitors were flooding into the palace. The end had come. Garviel Loken waited in the depths of the palace, in the ruins of the Parliament House. Descending from above in a lander came those he had once called brothers. The other two members of the Mournival, First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon and Little Horus Aximand. 4 brothers who had once sworn to die for each other now stood in the ash-covered Parliament Hall, looking into each other's eyes. "Why are you doing this, Ezekiel?" asked Loken. "To win is to survive, Loken," answered Abaddon coldly. "You will lose, and you will never have existed." Torgadon turned to Aximand. In Aximand's eyes there was deep regret, tears falling. He could not bear the weight of the betrayal. but he had already surrendered to chaos. Torgadon set aside his usual sardonic manner. He drew his sword. Two epic duels began simultaneously. Loken and Abaddon clashed like two opposing philosophies. Loken's honor and agility against the savage hatred within Abaddon's massive Terminator armor. Abaddon's armor was so powerful that Loken's sword strikes left only scratches. On the other side, Torgadon and Aximand were evenly matched. But Aximand's ambition and the dark power the warp had promised him prevailed. As Aximand swept his sword toward Torgadon's throat, he whispered, "I'm sorry," and the blade fell. Tarek Torgadon, that always laughing, always hopeful brother, crumpled lifeless to the ground. When Loken saw the death of his closest friend, he felt a pain as if losing his mind. He launched himself wildly at Abaddon, cornered him, began driving his sword toward Abaddon's heart. For the first time, he saw fear in Abaddon's eyes, that real death beneath the arrogance. But at that exact moment, the massive Titan war engine Dies Irae opened fire on the Parliament building. Massive stone blocks, statues, and ceiling collapsed onto Loken. Loken was crushed under the dark and heavy concrete, unable to move. As Abaddon and Aximand walked out through the ruins and returned to their ships, Loken looked through the small cracks in the ceiling. He saw gray clouds and orbital bombardment shells beginning to fall. Horus had ordered the planet leveled. In the palace, Saul Tarvitz stood with his final 100 men, smiling, head held high, with honor as he faced death. And Loken lay in the darkness and rubble, losing consciousness. He held on to a single thought. Because at that moment, deep in the warp, the Eisenstein was fighting an impossible battle, carrying Nathaniel Garrow and St. Euphrates Keeler, racing toward Terra, to bring the warning to the Emperor. The Horus Heresy had been born from the ashes of Istvan III, and now the entire galaxy would burn. The seeds had been planted in the brightness of the Great Crusade, in the loyalty of brothers who once stood shoulder to shoulder, in the trust of a son who loved his father. It all began with a single diplomatic failure, a single poisoned blade, a single lie whispered in the darkness of the warp. And it ended with a planet turned to ash, with a brotherhood shattered beyond repair, with a galaxy condemned to 10,000 years of war. Captain Garvio Loken had been there at the very beginning. He had seen Horus laugh. He had seen Horus lead. He had seen Horus fall. And only he knew how innocent the beginning had looked. And only he knew exactly when the light went out. What do you think? Was Horus truly a victim of manipulation? Or did he choose his own darkness the moment he stepped into that warp vision? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more dark stories from the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Until next time, the Emperor protects.